Let's open up the OG mailbag alongside Joe Giglio. I'm Joe Ovias. We are inside of Eford Studios, and when we open up the OG mailbag, we thank our friends at the Butcher's Market. It is Valentine's Day. It is not too late to run over to the Butcher's Market right now and get yourself a meal that all you got to do is slap together, throw the bags away, and make it seem like you cooked it up from scratch. It's not too late.
We're full of ideas on this program.
We try. So big thanks to the Butcher's Market for being part of Ovias and Giglio. And thank you for being part of OG Fans. Go to ogtrianglemedia.com to sign up today. That allows you to get the entire mailbag episode as part of OG Fans. You also get access to cool events. Like today's your last day to make us know or to let us know that you will be there at Longleaf on Wednesday for the State Carolina game. Dinner's on Dimitri.
Are you slightly worried?
In what sense?
I believe the forecast calls for 3 inches of snow on Wednesday.
Oh, next Wednesday?
Yeah.
Nah, man. And if it is...
Oh, I already know what's going to happen.
It's also February, which means none of that stuff's going to stick.
No, I already know what's going to happen.
What's going to happen?
Johnny World Traveler is going to go to Minnesota this weekend, and you're going to come back, and there's going to be 3 inches of snow, and you're going to be like, oh, it's 3 inches of snow. Like, I mean, I was just in -4 and 27 feet of snow, and I had to crawl backwards to the outdoor rink and then give CPR to my entire family after their dick and feet fell off from all the frostbite. That's coming.
I will not be doing any of that.
That's coming. I can already tell by Wednesday you're gonna be like, I'm a seasoned pro.
I will not be doing any of that. I'm just trying to survive, man. The high on Monday is -4.
Have you considered thermal underwear?
Yeah, so I have these
because I'm getting this right. Your son's outdoor tournament is outdoors in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, they had to move 2 of the games indoors though because it's so cold.
Yeah.
So Saturday will be 2 games outdoors. And then on Sunday, they're moving it indoors because I think the high on Sunday is 13.
You know what the number one thing I'm jealous of right now?
What's that?
You're going to get that good World War II heat. Because that's the only way you can heat -4 up to like 50. And it's going to feel so, and there'll be a fire.
Yeah.
And you'll have the World War II radiator.
Yeah.
And you're going to be like,
are we seriously going to get snow on Wednesday?
That is, hey man, you know me. I don't look at stuff.
But yeah, I never look at this stuff either.
When it was presented to my wife yesterday that we have an event on Wednesday, would you like to join us?
Dude,
it became...
It's a 65% chance of rain or a 65% chance of snow and a high of 36. No, and it's late February. None of that stuff's sticking, dude. We're fine. I'm not worried about it.
Famous last word.
Let's open up the OG mailbag, shall we?
Here's the mail, it never fails. Makes me want to wag my tail. When it comes, what a whale.
All right, let's go to the OG sports phone. This is from a 919 number.
Hey, guys. This is Bluegrass Matt. I just want to let you know I appreciate what you guys do. I'm really interested in the OG on business. It's obviously an industry that I'm not a part of. What I'd like to hear is potentially like a state of the podcast sort of segment or brief talk. Like, let me know how your subscribers are doing. Are you still seeing growth? How many do you have? Are you kind of at your targets? It seems like your advertising is doing well. You're getting more of them. They're definitely having an influence on me. Let me know if you guys need more support from us loyalists. If you need more grifting, let me know. I'm here to support you. I appreciate what you guys do. You make my commute much better. Thanks, guys.
Like at first, in the famous words of Jaromir Jagr to me during the 2002 playoffs.
Yeah.
What are you, police? Well, I mean, Bluegrass Matt, the highs and the lows of the week, man. We got a great Google review for our friends at Two Roosters from you. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Now you're up in my business.
I mean, I've said from the jump, we'll be as transparent as we can be about the nature of the business, the nature of the podcast.
I will tell you the same thing that the people who handle our numbers tell us.
Yeah.
You owe more in taxes this year. That's because you made more money this year.
Yes. So that's probably the best way to look at it. As far as like subscribers and things like that are concerned, I mean, you can look at it on YouTube. Right now, we're sitting at like 8,600 YouTube subscribers. We're approaching 2 million views on YouTube. I know the little tidbit LED
I was gonna
board.
say there we go. It says 1 million views, but it probably doesn't.
But it doesn't get granular. Like I was actually looking at YouTube this morning, and I think we're at like 1.9 million.
Whoa.
It doesn't tell you like 1 point whatever. It just says 1 million. It's just rounding off. I mean, that's not the point of the tidbit, but that's neither here nor there. So I mean, yeah, everything was up from 2023 to 2024. Subscribers, you look at subscribers in terms of YouTube, that's a vanity metric at this point. Followers and things like that have over time become more of a vanity metric than it is an actual true measure of what's happening, right? I mean, I could go right now on YouTube and literally buy subscribers. You could do it legitimately through YouTube itself. Like all you got to do is do a little promotions tab. You give them a bunch of money, they'll target, and then they're essentially guaranteeing you'll get an increase in subscribers.
It's not cheap though.
It is not
The one
cheap.
through YouTube.
No,
It's not cheap.
it is not cheap at all. And that's more at least trying to target like actual real users. There's any number of services that you can use that will go out there and get you bots and things like that.
I was gonna say, because you had originally, when we started, had kicked around the idea of some Google ads, right?
Dude.
But it's pricey.
It's pricey as hell. I
Yeah.
tried doing Google ads last spring around like NCAA tournament, NC State, Carolina, Duke, all that kind of stuff. I remember I went into the Google ads that's like, I want X amount of impressions for the YouTube channel. And it spit out a number to me of like $3,000. I'm thinking, oh, okay, $3,000 for the entirety of the ad run, like from February through April. No, that was for the week. I was like, we don't even make that. Like, no, like absolutely not. So if you're asking how things are going, there's a couple of ways to look at it. And
Are we still here?
yes.
So let's start there.
That's number one. Are we still doing this? Yes, we're still doing this. Number two, everything that we have done since we started in May of 2023 has been organic. We have not spent a single dime on any sort of promotional thing. Like I've not boosted anything on Facebook.
Oh.
I have not boosted anything
I
on
was gonna
TikTok.
say, but birthday parties, golf tournaments, stuff like that. Like we spend money on that.
No. That's separate.
Okay.
That's separate. I'll explain why in a second.
Okay.
So what I'm talking about is all the growth hacks that are available to you that all you have to do is pay them money. We have not done a single one of those.
Okay.
Not a single one of those growth hacks because people can see through it. It's fairly obvious to see, when you go to our YouTube page, you can see that our floor has increased over time in terms of how many people are watching a particular video. And I bring up YouTube because YouTube is the most public form of what we do because
Sure.
it's all available to you.
Yeah.
As far as the podcast is concerned, I mean, I can tell you in looking at the numbers when I was wrapping up 2024 versus 2023, you say, double the taxes gives you an example of where we're at. Well, same thing goes with in terms of audience. It's been double where we were in 2023 to 2024. And then based on early returns that I can get through things like Megaphone, which is the podcast backend that we use, you can see that we're trending upwards. Like, month to month, you're up 10%, 20%, whatever it is. The one that
now,
what's that?
not to be the newspaper person here now.
Yeah.
Now, why did we have a super good March, April,
Oh, NC State
May?
and the
the
Canes.
Canes.
And the Canes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like you can't,
Oh, I'll tell you,
you know
right
what I'm
now.
saying? Like you can't always count on that stuff because that was one of our downfalls in legacy media was they would be like, I don't understand. They had like this amazing, basketball season, or you had this amazing
Yeah.
football season, or what hockey or the U.S. Open or whatever.
Yeah.
Golf doesn't, but and you'd be like, I don't understand. Well, like, why is this year down? Like, you go to the NC State West Virginia game in 2019, and they're like, I don't get it. Like, why are people not watching? Why are they not reading? And I'm like, well,
well,
they're 1-7 in the league.
well, so now you're actually getting into the thing that bothers me the most here. The thing about the legacy media, I can't speak for newspapers because you actually know what your
It's very similar. Very, very similar.
And what I'm getting at though is that at least with the newspaper, you know what your subscriber numbers are. Like there's actually a hard count.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, for us, it would have been like podcast numbers versus radio
Sure.
numbers.
So let me explain the radio side of things, and then before
Well, you could chart the traffic though on the website, Ariel.
you can,
Yeah.
you can. So what I'm getting at is in terms of like the actual audio product, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the classic, this is all of radio, by the way. This is all of radio.
Yeah.
Okay. When your numbers are good, management will find a reason why your numbers are good that have nothing to do with you.
Correct.
When the numbers are bad, well, the numbers are bad because it's your fault. All those things that they use for context to explain why the numbers are good suddenly go away when the numbers are bad. It's like, well, why was this month terrible? I'm like, well, I don't know, guys. Maybe NC State shat the bed on football, and Carolina football is completely. I'll use October and November as a prime example of this past year.
Yeah.
So, like you said,
it's like a desert, man.
At the beginning of the season, everything's cooking. State goes on this run. You know, the Hurricanes are doing their thing. There's all sorts of drama with the hurricane season ending. People are still feeling warm and fuzzies after NC State, XYZ, right? Football season starts off pretty typical. You know, numbers go up. But then what happened? State sucked. Carolina's not really much of a story. The Panthers were terrible. And you can only talk about the Panthers so much when they're bad at that point in time. So when we got into mid-October and November, you see a direct correlation to why would I be engaged with this stuff? I mean, it's as simple as that. I can understand why. I can see the hard numbers. You never really get that on the traditional media side of things. I mean, Nielsen, I was just reading a story the other day about how Nielsen is the group that does radio ratings and television ratings. They've actually just changed how you get credit for listeners. It used to be you needed somebody to listen to 5 minutes of what you were doing. That's an eternity. That's
in your car.
That's an eternity in your car. They've now reduced it to 3 minutes.
Nice.
I still don't think that's enough, by the way. But this is what I'm getting at. Those are vibes. I mean, honestly, it's a formula. It's a proprietary formula. It's all based on vibes. What I've enjoyed about this format is that I can look at hard data. I can look at hard numbers. And it's, even though there are some holes you can poke into podcast data, you still get a better representation of who's doing what or who's listening and those types of things, right? Right down to where you're listening. And I'll say this.
Shout out to Hawaii.
Right. I'll say this specifically in terms of the business and what I've tried for myself as a measurement. We'll talk about YouTube real quick, and then we'll get into the podcast. With YouTube, from where we started in May of 23 versus where we are today, I've made conscious decisions to get a better representation of who's listening based on what we put out. It's very easy to take the hour to 90 minutes of what we do in a podcast, chop it up, and then repurpose it.
I see what you're saying.
Okay. At the beginning of this, I would take, all right, we talked about the Panthers. Well, here's this Panthers video. We talked about State. Well, here's this State video. And that to me wasn't a good representation of who's actually listening because you're chopping it up, right? And you're trying to chase the algorithm and the SEO and all that kind of stuff. So I thought, all right, let me make a conscious decision. And the only thing we're going to put on YouTube is the podcast itself with the timestamps to let you know, all right, you want to listen to this particular segment where we talk about the Canes? Well, here it is. Or this particular guest? Well, here it is. Two things have happened along the way. The time spent has gone up because you're just spending more time. You actually might stick around and listen to a little bit more of the podcast after you've heard what you've wanted to hear. So the time spent has gone up, which is good.
Think the take business is easy.
Right. So that's gone up, and the floor has gone up for the podcast itself. You go back and you look at the earlier podcast, the floor on YouTube specifically might be 500, 600 views.
So what you're saying is we're the Dave Doran of YouTube?
Yes.
Okay.
The bottom has not, we're not having, what was the year where he bottomed out?
19.
Right. Okay. So we're not having a 19.
Okay.
So now I look at a podcast and I look at the floor on YouTube, and the floor is around 1,200. So we've doubled what the floor is. And that's all through conscious decisions on my end about what we're going to put on YouTube. Now, podcasts are different delivery method, different apps, all that kind of stuff. So I look at two things in particular, and they're not necessarily the monthlies. It's more unique listeners.
Okay.
And podcast delivery versus actual consumption. Okay.
So delivery means I'm a subscriber. It goes to my feed, but I don't necessarily open and listen to it.
So what I would say about the unique listenership, we're at about, in a month, of actual different devices that have checked out the podcast, you are looking at around the equivalent of what you and I were getting when we were number one in radio.
Okay.
For the key demographic that people care about, which is men 25 to 54 in that format. Okay. So that's the CUME. In radio, it's called CUME. For us, it's unique listenership. And best I can tell with my rudimentary knowledge of these analytics, we're at about where we were when we were number one.
Okay.
Never forget, before we were fired, we were number one. Never let anybody tell you otherwise. Okay. So there's that. And then more importantly, there's the trick of downloads versus actual listening.
Okay. That's where, if I'm a subscriber, it goes to my phone, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's being actually consumed.
So there's total delivery, meaning that you might have an app that no matter what, every time we push out a new episode, it goes to your phone.
Yeah, like for my dad's phone.
Yes.
Yeah, they watch on YouTube.
Okay. So it goes to your phone. It registers that as a download. But what's the actual listenership of download?
I see what you're saying now.
So that's where I get into the much the much more granular aspect of it. And I would say that 95% of people who download the episode listen to the episode. And then some people eventually catch up as time goes on. But if you're looking at delivery versus listenership, it's nearly 1 for 1. If you have it, you're listening to it. It's not just kind of forgotten in the ether and you're not listening to the episode, which I think is a win.
Okay, so Matt, that was like 13 minutes, but I'm going to tell you something.
Yeah.
That review that you left for Two Roosters is the best thing that anybody can do for us.
Yes.
Short of giving us the $7,000 to go to Disneyland.
We're still waiting on that, by the way.
But if you can't afford that, those type of reviews are what help us the most.
And that's the thing. I'm glad we'll close the little OG business on that. I can spit out all sorts of numbers to you, and I can tell you why they're important or not important. But yes, the most important thing you can do as a listener to help the podcast, well, yes, is to consume it, but it's also to support the corporate champions who are supporting us. We cannot do this without their financial commitment. So you have to then reward them with the business, which comes in the form of, like you said, like reviews and whatnot. Like let them know, yeah, man, we heard about you because of the podcast, or we are supporting you because you guys support the podcast. That's the easiest way to make it work. And that's just good old fashioned American business.
Correct.
I really don't know.
We reinvented it. Once again, we did it.
That's just good old fashioned American business. All right. Next one.
You've got mail.
This is from a 919.
Hey guys, it's your favorite parking deck guru. I don't know if you noticed about the first phase of the construction around the arena. 150 room hotel, some apartments, and the application calls for the construction of 40 new buildings, some as tall as 40 stories high. I'm sure we're all looking forward to it. I'm still waiting on that article from Luke DeCock about the improvements of parking deck ingress and egress that he spoke of initially. So, looking forward to it, guys, as I'm sure everyone is.
What an ass. What an ass, Steve. I actually think this calls.
No, wait a second. No. In fairness to Steve.
No, there's no fairness.
No,
to
there
Steve.
is, though. There
What's
is.
the fairness to Steve?
Remember what they unveiled.
Okay.
What they unveiled was like this swanky East lot. You know, there's going to be a music auditorium. There's going to be these parking decks, but they're only 2 stories, and they're going to be fan friendly, and they're going to be cubby bunkers, and you're going to be able, like, what they unveiled to us in a public way was like, you see, like, this is going to be awesome.
Okay.
Now, what they're doing behind the building, which also takes up parking spots, is quite frankly not what they unveiled. So,
in what sense?
What's going on behind the building is now a 40-story building with whatever parking deck and everything else.
Yeah, that was always part of it.
That's not what was unveiled.
So you had the 2 separate things. You had
I know there's multiple phases.
Yeah, there's all sorts of phases. That was always part of the unveiling. Everybody just kind of they did a good job. They did a good job of making you focus on what's going in front of the building.
Yeah. They shell gamed us.
Of course they did.
Of course.
But
it's his right to call it out.
Okay, well, here's where I would push back then, though, because let's take a look around. We've spent a good chunk of the week talking about NC State athletics, right? Like we typically do. We've been everybody's complaining about NC State and basketball and all this stuff. Money matters, man. Take a look around. Even Carolina has to understand that the game has changed. In fact, I think it's appropriate that Steve is calling about this and being an ass about parking decks and whatnot when I see Greg Barnes at Inside Carolina with actual movement on what's going to happen with the Smith Center. What's the next evolution of that? This is from Inside Carolina. UNC eyeing North Campus for new basketball arena. The Carolina North site would allow for mixed-use development that potentially includes lodging, retail, entertainment, and dining. Does that sound familiar? You know who else is doing this? Wake effing Forest is doing this outside the Joel. That's why they took the Joel over as a university a couple of years ago. And they're putting the commons or the grounds or whatever the hell they're going to call it. But it looks a lot like your typical mixed-use retail space because that's what they have to do.
You know who else is doing this for real? Tennessee.
Yeah.
Neyland Stadium.
Yeah.
105,000 seat Neyland Stadium is developing a mixed-use area right behind the stadium. So this is obviously a trend throughout the country. That part I agree with. It's also called progress. I do agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
But he has a point. What they unveiled and what they're actually planning on doing are two different things.
I mean, welcome to development. That's another thing. I'm like, is this your first rodeo with what ends up being promised by architecture?
Sure.
By the architects versus what you actually get?
He has the right to point it out.
This is where I feel like being a Disney adult really helps me out. I mean, I'm still waiting on certain things at Epcot from the 80s that never actually panned out, okay? Go look at what they were going to do to Epcot before the pandemic versus what they actually have now, which is like a glorified, Hampton Inn lobby, as opposed to the Communicore festival space and all this other stuff. So this happens all the time. You want a real, what the hell happened here? Go downtown and look at Moore Square for what they actually wanted to do versus what you actually have. So this happens all the time.
Those pesky homeless.
Unhoused. The unhoused. As it's preferred to be called at this point. Anyway, this is from Lee Roberts, the chancellor at UNC from the Triangle Business Journal. If we're going to move the basketball arena to a location away from the central core of campus, we wouldn't put it in the middle of a surface parking lot with nothing else around. I mean, welcome to 2025. Lee Roberts understands that. So why don't you get that? And this gets back to the central premise of why all this stuff is happening, especially if you're an NC State fan. Yeah, but we want to keep up. We want to keep up. We want to do this and we want to do that. Well, where's this money? How do we do this? This is how you do it.
Sure, but you're missing a point here.
Okay, what's the point?
When Carolina does it, it's theirs. They're not sharing it with anybody. They're not splitting it with anybody.
Okay.
Okay.
This is a fair point.
So
this is a fair point.
I don't.
But you can't undo decades of decisions all of a sudden.
Right. No, I get that. But
you know what I'm saying?
What I'm saying though is when Carolina does it, it's their money. It goes in their pocket.
Yes.
And also, quite frankly, I've had conversations with Bubba Cunningham about, wow, I really wish we had this when he goes to a football game at NC State. I really wish we had this when he goes to the Lenovo Center for a basketball game or the NCAA tournament. So there's part of that, right? Part of that's location, traffic. We've all driven into the middle of campus, all those other things.
That's pain in the ass.
Right?
Yeah.
But Carolina has left money on the table for now decades with the Smith Center and their inability to capitalize on that. So let's not act like Carolina's some sort of trailblazer here.
Of course not. They're behind.
They're playing way catch up here.
Yes.
And they have doctors and lawyers and plumbers. I meant to send you the clip, but I didn't. Kenny Smith was talking about his college roommate who's a plumbing billionaire. I meant to send you that so I could add it to the list. Maybe it is the well.
Maybe.
It's the toilet.
Maybe.
The billionaire plumbing company.
Yeah, but I'm glad you.
So Dundon, I think Steve and people who are of Steve's ilk. Now, granted, that can be a very vocal minority. And I understand
it is a vocal minority.
I understand that. But I think his point is Tom Dundon's doing something for Tom Dundon. Now, how does NC State maximize their financial, progress out of that? That's what NC State has to ask themselves. And I think they've come a long way on that front. But, I think everything that happens over there is ultimately going to benefit Tom Dundon. And whatever trickle down economics happen after, that's the issue, I think, if you're looking at it from vis-a-vis State versus Carolina.
Well, the issue here for me, and I'll just wrap my thoughts around Tom Dundon. This area needs more Tom Dundons to drag it kicking and screaming into modern athletics, modern setups for how this stuff is supposed to go.
NC State would help themselves by sharing those numbers publicly. They would help themselves.
Yes. And to basically show you that despite the fact that we have this arrangement, we're actually going to be ahead of Carolina when it comes to a lot of these things.
Well, never mind Carolina. Just
But
here you are in revenue sharing.
But
and-
Carolina's the thing. I mean, the reason why the building has so many seats is because, well, we have to have more than the Smith Center. And of course, now they're going
They
around
never did
changing
to.
it.
Yeah.
So anyway, so if NC State didn't have a Tom Dundon doing this kind of stuff and others are trying to get them to kicking and screaming to do this, you'd actually be more in Carolina situation where they're just now getting around to thinking about what they're going to do with that building.
It also sounds a lot like Centennial Campus and Jim Valvano's vision from 1988.
Which, I mean, if we had a magic wand, and we could
Yeah,
go
if
back
we
in
did.
time.
Woo!
We could go back in time,
Yeah.
put the monorail, and get the building over there by Centennial. All right, this is from an 828.
Hey guys, watching the show. Great as always. I do have maybe a thought, something you could possibly talk about. I don't know if you have. I don't remember you doing it. Thoughts on maybe Duke hiring some kind of personal security for when the basketball team goes on the road. Because it's pretty evident the ACC doesn't care enough to implement anything. These individual schools don't care enough to actually do anything. And it's happened repeatedly. And, you know, it's not only student safety and fan safety, but there's a good possibility that a player or member of the coaching staff could get hurt or something could get started. And it's just unnecessary. Thoughts?
That was our guy. That was our guy, James.
Our guy, James.
Yes. I agree with you, by the way. I know some Clemson types were like, oh, John Shire assaulted this. And it's like, no, guys. No, after what happened at Wake Forest last year, he was not letting anybody near his players. And I get that it was Cooper Flag, but he was protecting his players. The way that they had that set up, that was abysmal. I've been in every single ACC arena. I've been at Virginia when they set it up and make sure that those, it typically is Duke or Carolina, okay? But they set it up. They have everything ready. They have their security ready. Clemson was completely and totally and wholly unprepared for that. And I'm glad that it worked out the way that it did.
Yeah.
The other thing you can't do, by the way, is turn the fucking lights off.
Yeah.
That was the other thing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sitting here going, oh, we got to put our
they spent all this money for their fancy new lights.
We got to play our fancy bullshit lights.
Yeah.
It was like a WCW pay-per-view.
It's
like, all the lights come out and
Sting
then
was about to drop.
Like,
yeah.
you can't do that shit, guys.
No.
Like, have a half of an inkling how to protect the players and the coaches themselves too, by the way.
Yeah, and this isn't
Thank
hard.
you. That was a very good call, James. You're back on the good list.
I didn't realize that was James. So I'm glad you pointed that out. This is also solely a Duke problem.
And Carolina, when Carolina's running hot, obviously.
To a certain extent, when Carolina's running hot, sure. But to me, this has always been, especially in the ACC, this is always a Duke problem. It's a Duke problem straight up. And I don't know if that's something where the ACC and Duke work in concert of like contingency plans when they're in town, where they say, "Hey, I know you got your fancy new lights, but let's read the room.
Let's wait until the players are off the floor and the team's safely off the floor."
Yeah, let's just read the room.
Yeah.
Like we don't have to do this right now. We can do all this other stuff kind of later.
Meet me at the paw.
There you go. That's what you tell them next time. Like, guys, out this way. Going out to the paw this way. That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing.
I can't believe Clemson rushed the field after beating NC State.
Yeah, you want to get people mad? Just put that on social media with like no context. So people like, and then you get the actually people like, we know we just did that to bother you. All right, one more free one from Nick. A couple of questions. Do you think the Four Nations face-off will help the Canes in terms of TV interest now that Jarvis and Aho are getting so much attention? And why would the NHL ever do an All-Star game again?
All right, first of all, last night was an absolute Canes reunion.
It really was.
It was a reunion.
I loved it. I thought it was great.
Second of all, I had no idea that Eric Holla was Finnish. Not a single clue that he is Finnish.
Which is weird because typically you associate a particular demeanor to Finns. He is not that guy.
But also like that makes it worse that he couldn't fit in here.
I know.
Like if you're Finnish and can't fit in here,
I know.
What in the world, dude? So that was my second takeaway. I'm going to get it wrong. Luosterainen, the Florida. So you had him, you had Holla, you had Teravainen, you had Aho, you had Rantanen, you had Noah Hannafin, you had Slavin. And was that everyone on the team on the ice last night?
I think so. Off the top of my head, I think so.
No, Gensel.
Yes, and Jake Gensel. Thank you,
guys. It was a fucking Canes reunion last night. Present, past, and future.
I know.
Like I'm just sitting here going, what on earth is happening? Right?
Yeah.
Now, that also made me think, hey, maybe we probably should have won the cup once or twice in this particular.
Yeah, it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard.
But then you get back to the rod. Now, who are the actual best players on the ice?
This is true too.
You're like, oh,
They're good complementary pieces.
Austin Matthews, Jack Hughes,
Kachuk.
all the Kachucks.
Pick a Kachuk.
Kenny
You know,
Kachuk.
whichever one.
And then poor Juicy, man. The one who got away, my Tariq Hill of hockey, the one who got away.
I'll tell you what,
man, he was down bad in the third period of that game.
I mean, I know it's best on best, but I do feel like the Four Nations tournament is illustrating just how fickle goaltending can be. And maybe, you know what, Eric Tulsky should be listened to a little bit more often about.
He's got a point.
Maybe he's got a point about, hey, man, you don't need to Vezina guy.
Because I would have paid the Juice.
I know, you would pay him all the money. Now, again, it's best on best. So it is what it is. Now, to the question, will this do anything for the likes of like Seth Jarvis and Sebastian Aho? To a certain extent, yes. They'll become individual fascinations. But when they're back in a Canes uniform, you still have to deal with the stupidity of how people view the Canes on the national media level, right? Does that mean that maybe you'll get one more glowing piece around Seth Jarvis during a national game or during the playoffs? Sure. Why not? I think that's great. I think that's a good thing. Now, as far as like the All-Star game question is concerned, yeah, I mean, look, you look at what's going on with the Four Nations tournament, and there's always going to be people who question whether or not these things are interesting or whatnot. What's the level of play going to be? Do they care? Well, yeah, man, they care. They're with their country mates, for heaven's sake.
The Swede was with me last night. I got a whole history of Finland last night. Or I'm going to have to ask, first question we get back with our guy.
Yeah.
Do you prefer Suomi
instead of Finland?
Because as the Swede told me, Finland is the Swedish word for Finland.
Oh, they gotta hate that then.
And also, did you know that Finland wasn't a country until after World War I?
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea of any of this. I also didn't realize St. Petersburg is was right next to or part of whatever modern day Finland was.
Yeah. And
that they lost a bunch of stuff. I also didn't realize they were on the same side as the bad guys in World War II.
That I don't.
I got a whole thing. Yeah, because they were fighting Russia.
That's true.
And we were technically on the same side as Russia.
Yes.
So technically, even though it was as explained to me, it was more like they just wanted to fight Russia rather than siding with Hitler.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like, ooh, problematic. But then I was looking at our current political climate going, ooh, just like us. Okay.
Yeah, well, I saw this
Here
joke.
we are.
I actually saw this joke because Russia's not involved in this because of the war in Ukraine.
Because of political reasons.
Political reasons. I'm thinking to myself, what about us? Right?
Getting our asses booed in Montreal.
And I'm thinking to myself, you're looking at Team USA and wait a minute, you mean we got all the badasses? Are we now Russia in the 80s? Is that what we are when it comes to hockey?
Things I tell you every World Cup and every Olympics, we're actually the bad guys.
Are we the baddies? And yeah, that's kind of how it. And last night, obviously, was put a dent in the hole. More Finns, more wins type thing. I don't know. Maybe you need you need more American dudes.
How about any NHL defenseman?
Well, there's that.
Might be. Oh, my last takeaway from last night, and as obviously it was explained to me by the Swede. That,
of course,
Barkov. Really? Finish, sir?
I know.
Do I need to explain this to you?
Well,
that's when the Swede gave me the whole. Well, you see, actually, most of Finland was Russia before, and I'm like, okay.
Now, as far to wrap the point on the All-Star stuff, yeah. Look, Gary Bettman, I think this week announced that they're going to be starting the World Cup of hockey, which is going to be an NHL sanctioned thing. They're not going to use the International Federation for this. So I think the way it plays out is they're going to have some sort of international competition every other year. So you have your Olympics participation and you have the World Cup of hockey. So that'll take place every 2 years. That's why the Four Nations was this kind of one-off event in place of the All-Star game. More of this. This is what you want. More best on best. Put because the All-Star weekends, I mean, they're for cities, they're for the fans. I get all that kind of stuff. But if you're looking in terms of an actual entertaining product, this is what you need more of.
More of this until Sebastian Aho snaps his fibula into 14 pieces against Sweden on Saturday night, and then you go, well, why are these guys playing in these games?
They were doing this in the Olympics too. I mean, you run that risk.
And that's why there was questions, and that's why the things happened about the Olympics that did.
I get that, but you know what? These guys want to play. Let them freaking play.
Okay.
And it's actually coming out in these games too. This is not your typical all-star. We're going to pass it around. We're just having a good old time. Pond hockey.
No.
No, sir. This is intense hockey, and that's what sells your game. That's what it's about. That's what sells your game. You juxtapose that with what's going on with the NBA All-Star game.
Maybe they have a Four Nations tournament where every team gets to draft a Russian goalie as their proxy goalie.
Maybe.
And then we would be okay.
Maybe that's the case. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for the free portion of the OG mailbag.
Barkov is finished.
If you
and Hala, those two. Come on, Finland.
If you want the rest, go over to ogtrianglemedia.com. Go sign up. Be part of OG fans. And if you're already part of OG fans, email Dimitri back. Let him know if you're going to be there at Longleaf on Wednesday in the snow with us watching Carolina and NC State. So go to ogtrianglemedia.com. Sign up today for as little as $13 a month. You can save if you sign up for the year, and you get access to all sorts of goodies. So we appreciate you for being part of OG fans.